Hey guys, Matt Smith back here with you. I'm going to do one final video here on the college football playoff expansion to 12 teams. Posted two videos a couple days back where I touched on, in the first one, kind of the logistics, the calendar, what remaining unknowns we're not sure of, and I do a mock of the 2019 season in the 12-team format. So that's one of them. And the second one was kind of just my thoughts on why I'm disappointed we're going to 12 teams, why I think it's bad for the sport as a whole, and the things I'm really going to miss that were unique to college football that we have had for the first 30 years that I've been watching college football of my life that I think are going to go away when we go to a 12-team model in a couple years. So checking those out. Today I'm going to just touch on a couple hodgepodge topics. I want to start with the Notre Dame angle. I'll get into some winners and losers as well, and maybe touch on scheduling here at the end. So try and make this one a little bit shorter, but I try and not be long-winded for you guys here. So anyhow, the Notre Dame angle, just to recap, they cannot be a top four seed. Even if they're ranked in the top four in the final poll, they would be the fifth seed and have to play a first round game. Now, that seems like, oh, wow, Notre Dame has to, if they make the playoff, they're going to have to play 4 games to win a national championship. Well, okay, on the surface, that may seem like a disadvantage, but remember, they are not playing on that first Saturday of December. So while those conference champions, in order to earn the top 4 seeds and the bye, will have to play on that day, Notre Dame will not be playing. So they would treat their 13th game as a week later, 2 weeks later. We'll see how the calendar shakes out. So just like those top 4 seeds who are all conference champions, if Notre Dame is to advance to the quarterfinal round, they will have played 13 games. So they're not going into with any extra workload as they make the run for those final 3 games, and that would put them at 16 games if they do make the national championship game, just like all the teams that had a bye. Plus, they get a home game. If they're ranked in the top 8 of the final poll, there will be a playoff game in South Bend. Good for business, great atmosphere to have 80,000 people there. Everyone loves it, and obviously, as I said in the previous videos, I hate the top 4 seeds don't get a home game. That makes no sense to me. I hope they revisit that before this thing gets finalized. Also, I think the at-large access for Notre Dame was the most important thing, at least for Jack Swarbrick, who was on the task force. In an 8-team model, we frequently heard that the 5-1-2 model was going to be what most people liked. You have your 5 auto bids for the Power 5. The group of 5 would take 1, its highest champion, and you have 2 at-larges. So only 2 out of those 8 spots would be available to Notre Dame as an independent. In the 12-team model, you have 6 spots available for at-larges. So that's 6 of the 12, or 50%. So deciding to not go with 8 and instead go with 12, Notre Dame now has double the amount of spots available compared to the total number of teams in the field. So I think that's definitely a win for them. Access was huge for them. They were happy with 4 because they're all technically at large spots. But I think the fear with 8 was that 6 of those 8 spots are going to be swallowed up by conference champions, which Notre Dame obviously can never be, assuming they stay independent. And one little side benefit could be that if they do move out of the top 4 to number 5, some team has to elevate into that 4th spot, whether it's a number 5, number 6 team. Using last year, when Notre Dame was number 4, they would have fallen to 5. Oklahoma gets elevated to number 4 from number 6 because 4 and 5, Notre Dame and Texas A&M, were not league champions. So if you're projecting into the quarterfinal round, Notre Dame is paired with Oklahoma instead of Texas A&M. Were those teams pretty even by the end of last year? Probably. But there's a chance where the number 5 team would be kind of significantly better than the number 6 team in certain years. So that could benefit them, even though Notre Dame drops a spot. They might be playing a lesser team, again, probably small margins, but they'd be playing Oklahoma instead of Texas A&M should the bracket progress in the quarterfinal round. So just some kind of nuance there about how that works. And if Notre Dame doesn't win a national championship in this 12-team format, and odds are they probably won't, it's going to be for the same reasons they haven't won one since 1988. They're in a cold weather area. Most of the talent's in the South and the far West. Obviously, they have some uniqueness in terms of academics and culture there you're not going to see at the big state schools. And if you want to say Brian Kelly's not a championship level coach, I personally don't think that's an issue for them. But maybe you disagree. So those would be the reasons they're not winning a national championship. No different than it has been for the last 33 years. So this should have no impact on their ultimate goal of competing for national titles. And that initial reaction, I think it did cool down once people got into the substance and heard from Jack Swarbrick that there's nothing unfair to Notre Dame about this 12-team proposal. In terms of winners and losers, I think the 4 members of the task force did a great job at representing their employers. We just talked about what Jack Swarbrick did for Notre Dame. Greg Sankey at the SEC, I think 12 is also much more favorable to them than 8. With an 8-team spot and 2 at-larges, or an 8-team playoff and 2 at-larges, I think the SEC is likely to only get one of the two. They're probably not getting both from the same conference. So they're only getting 2 out of 8. And I think with 12, if you just use the New Year's 6 bowl teams as a predictor for what the 12-team playoff full pool would look like, I think the SEC getting 4 out of 12 in many years is pretty likely, and that's 33%, obviously a win for them. Craig Thompson's the Mountain West commissioner. I think they're the most likely to benefit from the task force going with the top 6 conference champions as opposed to auto bids for all the 5 Power 5 leagues. Should we see an upset like had Pitt or Virginia beaten that Clemson team in 2018 or 2019, they're probably not getting in because they're ranked below 2 Group of 5 champions. We had UCF and Memphis, obviously, from the AAC, which is the number 1 G5 conference. But we also had Boise State and Fresno State ranked kind of in that 18 to 20 range in a couple of those years. So they would probably be ranked ahead of the ACC champion, who's a 4-loss Coastal team, and they could sneak in as that 6th highest rated conference champion. So that little tweak that I don't think we were expecting when we heard the initial model of 12 teams, I think the Mountain West could ultimately be a beneficiary should we see one of those big upsets. Group of 5, of course, is a winner, and also Bob Bowlesby from the Big 12, he was on the task force. I think 12 allows the Big 12, which remember is the only league that always has its 2 best teams in the league championship game. The SEC, we've seen some one-loss teams not make it, Alabama in 2017. The Big 10, Ohio State in 2016 did not make it, but they both got in the playoff. The Big 12 now, by having their number 2 team always playing in that game, should they absorb a loss, kind of like Iowa State last year, in an 8-team model, they're probably out. They're probably not getting one of the 2 at-large spots if they lose their last game. But with 12, last year we'd have still seen Iowa State, who lost that nail-biter to Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. They'd still gotten in. So I think it's good for the Big 12. And I think for the Big 3 schools, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, this gives them the opportunity to, if they have a key injury, to possibly rebound and get in the 12-team format, get hot, and still win a national title because of their talent. So if they do have a quarterback injury, kind of like we saw with Tua last year, or maybe if Clemson had lost that Boston College game without Lawrence and then lost at Notre Dame, maybe they're still able to sneak in and get hot with Lawrence back. I know last year, again, I hate comparing it to anything because it was so unique. But in that situation where you don't have your quarterback for 2 weeks, you lose to two decent teams, you can still sneak in a 12-team format, get hot, and win this national title on talent alone. So again, those seismic days where teams like Alabama and Clemson lose, they're just not going to be a big deal anymore because those teams can probably take another loss and still get in the playoffs. So I think they're sitting pretty here in terms of if they have a couple bad weeks in a row because of key injuries, they can still get in, get hot, compete for national titles. In terms of losers, I guess you would say the ACC, because they've been the most likely conference to have a 3 or 4 loss team in the conference championship game. So by not having an auto bid, you could see a situation like those Pitt and Virginia teams winning and then not getting in as a bid stealer. They'd still be out, while Clemson, of course, would still get in as an at-large. I think some of the Tier 2 bowls could be perceived as losers, your Citrus Bowls, your Alamo Bowls. That they're normally getting teams ranked 13, 15, 17. Those teams were pretty pumped to go to those games. They were never playoff contenders. They never really had a shot, at least late in the season. But now those teams are going to be the ones that just missed the cut in the playoffs. So are they going to be pumped to go to Orlando, to go to San Antonio? Maybe not. So maybe they're going to have smaller fan bases travel. I think those bowls, kind of the highest outside of the New Year's Six, might take a hit. And the scheduling note I wanted to mention, there's been a debate about whether this will increase big non-conference games, whether it will decrease them. My answer is it's not going to have much of an impact. I really don't believe that. If you're trying to assess how the committee is going to weigh strength of schedule and then use those results to plan your future schedules, as we know in college football, these games are scheduled 6, 7, 8, 10 years out. And we haven't stuck to a format for very long. We've gone from, a BCS where we had 4 bowls, then we had a BCS with 5 bowls for 8 years each. Then we had 7 years of this playoff. I guess it's probably going to finish at 9 total. Then we'll go to the 12-team playoff. So it's really hard to consider, hey, this format that we've seen results for 3 years, when I'm trying to schedule 7 years out, should I be married to what the committee has done in terms of how they judge resumes? I don't think they'll do that. We know that there's complexities in CFP scheduling. more based on, can I get 80 to 90,000 people in my stadium to play Georgia State? You can do that in the SEC. You can't do that in the Pac-12 more than once per year. You never see these Pac-12 teams, USC, UCLA. They're really only playing one dud home game a year, unlike the SEC, who often plays three because they can get their stadium to 90% capacity for those games. Those financial factors are going to be way more important than just trying to pigeonhole this and get your perfect schedule where you can have two losses and still get in the playoff, or three and get in the playoff. It's just not going to work that way. And I think we've seen Alabama they set the bar back in 2008, starting the trend of neutral site games. Now they're moving away and going back to home and homes. They're likely going to be playing 10 Power 5 games starting in probably 4 or 5 years. I think we'll see most of the SEC Blue Bloods, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that they're going to be playing 10 Power 5 games in most years. So I do think we'll see an uptick in quality non-conference games, especially from the SEC, but that's not because of the playoff expansion. It's more because of financial factors and just the novelty, I guess, of those big neutral site openers has worn off after 10 or 15 years. So that's all I wanted to cover today. Again, check out my other 2 videos on this topic. Please let me know what you think of the playoff reactions on Twitter at MattSmithCFB, writing, of course, at southernpigskin.com. We're getting close, guys. Media days are only about 1 month away. And once those are here, we know the start of the season is just right around the corner. It's going to be a heck of a lot more fun than all the craziness and frustrations we experienced in 2020. So can't wait for it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.